Subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon so that you never miss any video lesson from Rao's IAS Study Circle. Hello and welcome to Daily News Simplified, an answer to what, why and how of newspaper reading from your UPSC perspective. Today, we shall discuss the important news which has appeared in the New Delhi edition of the Hindu newspaper. Dated 22nd June 2020, the news to be discussed has been displayed on your screen and time stamping for the same has been provided in your description box below. So on this note, let's start our today's discussion from your pre as well as mains perspective. The first news to be discussed appears on page number 1. It says secrecy of ballot is key to free and fair elections as per the Supreme Court of India. The Supreme Court said that a voter can also voluntarily waive the privilege of non-disclosure as per the three-judge bench of Supreme Court of India. Now in this article you must know about section 94 of Representation of People Act, as it talks about right to secrecy with respect to your vote. However, there is another aspect as well which the Supreme Court in this judgment highlighted, that is right to waive off one's secrecy. That is, if a person wants to tell other people that whom they have voted for, then no one can stop them or prevent them from doing so. So both aspects have been covered within section 94 of Representation of People Act 1951, and this particular legislation becomes important because it has been specifically provided under GS paper 2 with respect to salient features of Representation of People's Act. Now here you must understand that there are two acts. One is with respect to the Representation of People Act of 1951 and the other act pertains to the Representation of People Act of 1950. So in this regard you must also know the difference with respect to these two legislations. Further, this topic under your prelims examination gets covered under Indian polity and governance, especially with respect to your rights issue including right to vote and right to secrecy of ballot. So, the three-judge bench of the Supreme Court of India highlighted the importance of secrecy of ballot. The court said that the choice of voter should be free and the secret ballot system in a democracy ensures such freedom. That is, no person can either force or coerce any person to find out whom he or she has voted for. So, in this, the Supreme Court said that the principle of secrecy of ballots is an important postulate of constitutional democracy and accordingly has been laid down as a statutory law under section 94 of Representation of People Act of 1951, and the main purpose of this provision is to protect secrecy of ballot. The provision says that secrecy of voting not to be infringed. So the element of force or coercion cannot be applied here. So it says that no witness or other person shall be required to state for whom he or she has voted at an election. However, this section shall not apply to such witness or other person where he has voted by open ballot. So principally this provision applies to secret ballot or any voting which take place through secret ballot. Further, the Supreme Court held that even a remote or distant possibility that a voter can be forced to disclose for whom she has voted would act as a positive constraint and a check on freedom to exercise of franchisee. So, any distinct possibility of elements of force or coercion with respect to disclosing for whom a person has voted would amount to a constraint on right to vote as provided by the Constitution of India. Now this aspect becomes very important because the UPSC has asked this particular question in your prelims examination. Now let us go through these two questions asked in the UPSC prelims examination of 2017 and 2011. So the question asked was, right to vote and to be elected in India is a, options were fundamental right, natural right, constitutional right and legal right. Now in this the correct answer as per UPSC answer key is constitutional right. Coming to this question was, under the Constitution of India, which one of the following is not a fundamental duty? Options were to vote in public elections, to develop scientific temper, to safeguard public property and to abide by constitution and respect its ideals. Obviously the correct answer here was A, that is to vote in public elections is not a fundamental duty. So here we see two aspects of right to vote being asked by UPSC in a different way. In the first aspect, it was asked with respect to your constitutional rights, and the second aspect, it was asked whether it is a part of fundamental duty or not. So it's not a part of fundamental duty. So both these questions becomes important with respect to right to vote. Now coming to the other aspect with respect to right to waive off one's secrecy, the Supreme Court stated that the voter can voluntarily waive their privilege of non-disclosure. And on this point, the Supreme Court elaborated by saying that the privilege ends when the voter decides to waive the privilege and instead volunteers to disclose as to whom he or she has voted. So basically, if a person wants to waive off their privilege of non-disclosure, then they are free to do so and no one can stop them. So in this regard, the Supreme Court said that no one can prevent a voter from disclosing whom he or she has voted for if they so want to do. Further, the Supreme Court also said that if a person wants to waive off this privilege of non-disclosure, then no criminal complaint can be filed against such person under Representation of People Act of 1951. So this news highlights about right to secrecy to vote under section 94 of Representation of People Act of 1951. So the Representation of People Act 1950 provides for allocation of seats and delimitation of constituencies for purpose of election to the House of the People, that is Lok Sabha, and legislatures of states. It also provides for qualification of voters at such elections, preparation of electoral rolls, manner of filling seats in Council of States to be filled by representatives of union territories, and related matters. So in this regard, you must remember these four important aspects with respect to Representation of People Act of 1950. That is, it provides for allocation for delimitation of constituencies, it provides for qualification of voters at such elections, it provides for preparation of electoral rolls, and it provides for manner of filling seats in the Council of States or Raj Sabha. So these four aspects you must remember with respect to the Representation of People Act 1950. Now coming to the Representation of People Act of 1951, it says that an act to provide for conduct of elections of houses of parliament and to the house or houses of legislature of each state. So it provides for conduct of elections. It then provides for qualifications and disqualifications for membership of those house. Further, it also provides for the corrupt practices and other offences at or in connection with such elections. And lastly, it also provides for decision of doubts and disputes arising out of or in connection with such elections, basically related to election petition during the elections. So these can be said to be the different objectives of Representation of People Act of 1950 and that of Representation of People Act of 1951. So in this regard, you must remember the difference of objective with respect to both these legislations. Also, because the salient features of Representation of People Act is an important part of your GS2 syllabus. So after understanding about right to secrecy under Representation of People Act 1951, let us move on to our next topic of discussion. Now the next news to be discussed appears on page number 9. It says additional funds sought for Jal Jeevan Mission. Jal Shakti Ministry wants control of finance panel's panchayat grants for water sanitation to dovetail with JJM. JJM here refers to Jal Jeevan Mission. So this particular news highlights two important aspects. First is that the Ministry of Jal Shakti has asked for additional funds worth rupees 82,000 crores from the Finance Commission. And this has been because according to the Jal Shakti Ministry, there has been a shortfall with respect to funding the Jal Jeevan Mission at 45% for the year 2019-20 both by center and states and approx 32% for the year 2020-21 by the center. So in this regard, the Jal Shakti Ministry has asked for additional funds specially for Jal Jeevan Mission worth rupees 82,000 crore. Now before understanding the second point, let us understand this particular aspect of funding of Finance Commission. Now the Finance Commission has provided rupees 30,375 crore as tied funds, and this tied funds of rupees 30,375 crore has been given to the rural local bodies specially for water and sanitation. Now this means that the rural body can use this particular amount only for water and sanitation. So in this regard, the Jal Shakti Ministry has stated to the Finance Commission that it wants control over these untied funds granted to rural local bodies for drinking water and sanitation. So these are the two issues which has been highlighted in this particular news. And as already mentioned, that the amount allocated to tied funds can be used only for that particular purpose. So the rural local bodies have to utilize rupees 30,375 crores only for water and sanitation as provided by the Finance Commission of India. So these are the two aspects highlighted in this particular news. And accordingly, the Jal Shakti Ministry has presented their proposal to the Finance Commission of India. Now regarding Jal Jeevan Mission, you must know that Jal Jeevan Mission aims at providing potable water at service level of 55 litre per capita per day to every rural household through functional household tap connection, and this must be achieved by the year 2024. Now here we are talking about the funding or financing of Jal Jeevan Mission. So in this regard, let us go through this budget document for the year 2021. Now as you can see that the Jal Jeevan Mission has been categorized under the core schemes of the Government of India. Now here you must understand that the schemes of the Government of India are categorized either as central sector schemes or centrally sponsored schemes. Now under the central sector schemes, 100% funding is done by the central government, whereas under the central sponsored schemes, the center and state provide funds in a defined proportion. So under the centrally sponsored schemes, the schemes are divided into three aspects. First is core of the core schemes, second is core schemes, and the third is optional scheme. Now with respect to core of the core schemes, which are more important to the Government of India, the funding patterns remain same. That is, whatever the funding pattern was earlier with respect to these core of the core schemes, this has not been changed. However, those schemes which comes under core schemes, the funding pattern has been changed. Now as you can see in this particular document of budget of 2021, that Jal Jeevan Mission is a core scheme, whereas there are six core of the core schemes. These are National Social Assistance Program, Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Program, Umbrella Scheme for Development of Scheduled Castes, Umbrella Program for Development of Scheduled Tribes, Umbrella Program for Development of Minorities, and Umbrella Program for Development of Other Vulnerable Groups. So you must remember these differentiation with respect to core of the core schemes as well as core schemes, and six schemes of the Government of India has been categorized under core of the core schemes. Now this particular aspect of central sector versus centrally sponsored schemes has been dealt in detail in the QIP videos covered by Baswa sir. Now here as you can see that he has dealt in detail with respect to difference between the central sector scheme as well as centrally sponsored schemes, whereby he has mentioned these categories of core of the core schemes and optional scheme. Under optional schemes, he has provided that no optional schemes has been mentioned as per the 2020 budget, whereas there are 6 core of the core schemes and 24 core schemes of the central government. Now with respect to the funding of Jal Jeevan Mission, this particular document of the government highlights Jal Jeevan Mission is a time-bound mission mode program, and for its successful implementation, robust financial planning, timely funding, mobilization of adequate resources, and prudent utilization of funds are prerequisites. And accordingly, it has provided for share between center as well as states with respect to the Jal Jeevan Mission. Now with respect to Himalayan and northeastern states, the share of center would be 90% and share of state would be 10%. For other states, the share of center and state would be 50% each. For union territories having legislature, that is Puducherry and Delhi, the central share would be 90% and the share of state legislature shall be 10%. Whereas union territories without legislature, the central share would be complete 100%. So this is the financial allocation of Jal Jeevan Mission, as Jal Jeevan Mission is a core scheme of the Government of India. So it is in this aspect that the Ministry of Jal Shakti wants control over untied funds granted to rural local bodies for drinking water and sanitation. And in its suggestion to the Finance Commission, the Ministry of Jal Shakti has highlighted that there are as of now no guidelines available to panchayats so that they can identify important work which is needed for Jal Jeevan Mission. And also, there is no criteria or indicators set or fixed to assess the performance or development of these Panchayati Raj institutions regarding the use of rupees 30,375 crores which has been provided as part of TIDE grants for water as well as sanitation. So in this regard, the Jal Shakti Ministry has proposed to the Finance Commission that these TIDE grants worth rupees 30,375 crore be placed with the Jal Shakti Ministry and not with the Panchayati Raj institutions, as the Panchayati Raj institutions lack any regulatory monitoring of these TIDE grants worth rupees 30,375 crores. Further, the ministry has highlighted that if it is provided control over this amount of TIDE grants which has been provided to the rural local bodies, then in turn it will release these amounts to the panchayats and also ensure that they follow the Jal Shakti Mission's 5-year village action plans guidelines. So this is the suggestion which has been provided by the Jal Shakti Ministry to the Finance Commission. So let's see what the Finance Commission decides in this particular case. So from your prelims perspective, this topic gets covered under Indian polity and governance as well as economic and social development. And from your mains perspective, it gets covered under GS paper 2 as well as GS paper 3. So in this news analysis, you must remember the difference between central sector schemes and centrally sponsored schemes. And under centrally sponsored schemes, it has been divided under core of the core schemes, under which there are 6 schemes, core schemes under which there are 24 schemes, and optional schemes under which as of now there are no schemes as per the budget of 2020. And according to the budget document, the Jal Jeevan Mission has been categorized as a core scheme. With this, let's move on to our next news discussion. The next topic of discussion appears as a lead article on page number 6. It says, India's continuing two-front conundrum. The mistake in 1962 is instructive today, an obsession about Pakistan and a degree of complacency about China. So basically, in this particular lead article, the author has highlighted 2 important points. First is that India is always obsessed with a threat from Pakistan, and in this context, India ignores a rather more important threat emanating from China. So, the author has said that India should focus both threats in a balanced way because China maintains a very friendly relationship with Pakistan. Now, the second aspect highlighted in this article is with respect to the belief of both Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru and of our present Prime Minister Narendra Modi that by cultivating personal friendships with the top leadership of Communist China, a deeper bond of solidarity and friendship can be created with China. And in this regard, both the Indian Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru and the Defense Minister V.K. Krishna Menon did not anticipate China's attack on India. Now further, the article highlights about the similarity with respect to the visits of Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru as well as our present Prime Minister Narendra Modi. The article says that in 1954, Jawaharlal Nehru visited China for discussions with Mao Zedong as well as Zhou Enlai. Whereas in 1959, Chinese forces attacked our border and a full-fledged war occurred between the two countries in 1962. Now, on similar lines, in 2014, Prime Minister Narendra Modi hosted the Chinese President Xi Jinping. Now, this particular meeting was followed by the Doklam standoff of 2017. Now, after Doklam standoff, in 2018 at the informal Wuhan summit, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi visited China in Wuhan and expressed the friendship and solidarity of the two countries. The 2018 informal Wuhan summit was then followed by the 2019 informal Mamallapuram summit, whereby the Chinese president visited India. Now, this article says that despite these friendly relations between the top leadership of both countries, Chinese forces clashed with Indian forces along the LAC in the Galwan Valley region. So overall, this article highlights this kind of a similarity whereby both leadership, that is Prime Minister Nehru as well as Prime Minister Modi, believed that cultivating personal relationship or friendships with the top Chinese leader can strengthen the solidarity or ties between the two countries. However, things have happened just in reverse. Now, in this regard, the author has also highlighted about a significant move taken by the Prime Minister of India, Mrs. Indira Gandhi, in 1971 with respect to India-Pakistan war. So, with respect to India-Pakistan war in 1971, Prime Minister of India Indira Gandhi took a very calculative move so that China does not come forward to help Pakistan. And this was ensured through the Treaty of Peace, Friendship and Cooperation with USSR or Russia. So it is in this regard the author concludes by saying that India faces two sides conundrum, and in this regard India should consider threats from both sides in a balanced manner. That is, India should not be obsessed from threat from Pakistan but should also look at the contemporary reality whereby China seems to be a larger threat for India as compared to Pakistan. So, with respect to our border tensions on both the Western Front as well as on the Eastern Front, so the author has concluded by saying that India needs a long term strategy in order to tackle threats from both sides of the border, that is, from Pakistan as well as from China. And in this regard, India needs a long term strategy in order to contain such threats. So, this article becomes important primarily from the perspective of internal security as well as international relations. With this, let's move on to our next news discussion. Now, the next news to be discussed appears as an article on page number 6 and also as a data point on page number 7. The article says that fighting a double pandemic, there is an escalation in the risk millions face from domestic and gender based violence. And the data point highlights about silent victims of violence. The data point says that during the first four phases of COVID 19 related lockdown, Indian women filed more domestic violence complaints than recorded in a similar period in the last 10 years. But even this unusual spurt is only the tip of the iceberg, as 86% of women who experience domestic violence do not seek help in India. So, this is a very alarming data, especially with respect to the spike in cases of domestic violence. The most important aspect is that most of the cases of domestic violence are still underreported. So it is in this regard it highlights about buried in silence. It says about 86% women who experienced violence never sought help, and 77% of the victims did not even mention the incidents to anyone. In this regard, the types of violence as prescribed in the data point are physical violence, sexual violence, physical and sexual violence. Whereby physical violence, which has never been told to anyone, accounts to almost as close as 80%, whereas sexual violence, which has never been told to anyone or has not been reported, accounts to more than 80%. Further, with respect to physical and sexual violence, it says that only 14.3% of people or women sought help from a different source. So, this data highlights about the underreporting of sexual and domestic violence in our society. So, in this regard, the article says that there can be two kinds of impact of COVID. One which is more visible and more talked about, especially with respect to the health and economy aspects of the COVID, and second is the invisible aspect, that is the social well being of humans, primarily that of girls as well as women. So, here the author says that it is this aspect of social well being which is not mostly or not generally talked about during the COVID 19 lockdown. And the social as well as psychological impact of COVID 19 is more on women as compared to men because of gender biasness which exists in our social structure. And this gender biasness as well as lockdown because of the COVID 19 has led to various cases of gender based violence. So, in this regard, the author highlights various evidence through which we can say that the cases of gender based violence has increased in the society, especially during the lockdown. And in this regard, the author has also suggested certain measures which can be taken to prevent cases of domestic violence in our society, especially during the lockdown as well as post lockdown. Now, with respect to evidence, the first aspect highlighted is with respect to more cases of domestic violence, including their underreporting, as has also been highlighted in the data point on page number 7. The second evidence is that there has been an increase in distressing calls, as there has been an increase in calls to emergency helplines by women. So, this also shows that women are being subjugated during the lockdown. The third evidence highlighted is with respect to lack of medical care for women, as in some houses, women are prevented from going to the doctor. Also, we have observed cases of abuse of female doctors and nurses who are on the duty to fight COVID 19. Now, the fourth point highlighted here is that women account for roughly close to 70% of workforce in social sector, including health and education. and therefore have a larger chance of getting infected by COVID 19. So this way, COVID has also impacted large number of women who are there on the front line. And lastly, the article says that because of COVID 19, there has been closure of schools, and this has prevented learning among girls, and this has increased learning gaps between boys as well as girls. Further, because of the closure of schools, the girls are forced to stay at home, and this has resulted in greater cases of their sexual exploitation, forced marriage, as well as early pregnancy. Now, further, because of the closure of schools, children, including girls, are not able to report their cases of sexual exploitation to their teachers. So, this is how the lockdown because of COVID 19 has impacted social, physical, as well as mental well being of girls as well as women in India. Now, with respect to measures which can be taken, the author says that there is a need to have greater access to healthcare, especially with respect to physical as well as mental health, especially for girls as well as women. The next point highlighted is that the government must focus on financial independence for girls as well as women, especially those who are working in the MSME sector or micro, small and medium enterprises. And in this regard, government must provide financial assistance on priority wherever women are employed, especially in the MSME sector. So the second point highlighted by the author is with respect to the financial independence of women, as financial independence will not only allow them greater access to healthcare but will also improve their physical as well as mental health. Thus, this topic becomes important primarily from the perspective of GS Paper 2, especially with respect to welfare schemes for the vulnerable sections of the population, as well as issues relating to health, education, as well as human resources. Now, in your mains examination, impact of COVID 19 on women and their mental as well as physical health can be asked in your UPSC mains examination. So, in this regard as well, this topic becomes important from the perspective of GS paper 2. With this, let's move on to our next news discussion. Now, the next news to be discussed appears on page number 9. It says naval ship bringing back 198 from Malé. And this is with respect to Operation Samudra Setu carried on by the Indian Navy. Now, this topic becomes primarily important from your prelims perspective. First, that Operation Samudra Setu is carried by Indian Navy for those people who are stuck in different countries because of the COVID-19 situation. And Operation Samudra Setu is carried under the aegis of Operation Vande Bharat mission of the Indian government. Further, in this operation, three ships are used, that is INS Jalashwa, INS Magar, and INS Airavat. So, in this particular news, it highlights that the Navy has launched Operation Samudra Setu on 8th May to repatriate citizens stuck abroad due to COVID-19 pandemic. And since then, Indian citizens have been evacuated from Maldives, Sri Lanka, as well as Iran. And in this regard, INS Jalashwa and INS Magar had evacuated 2,874 individuals from Maldives as well as Sri Lanka. So, from your prelims perspective, Operation Samudra Setu becomes important, especially as a rescue mission. Now, in this regard, the Press Information Bureau has stated that Indian naval ship Airavat has entered the port of Malé at Maldives as a part of Indian Navy's ongoing Operation Samudra Setu under the aegis of Indian government's Operation Vande Bharat to bring back Indian nationals from foreign shores. This particular news highlights that as on 21st June, 198 Indian citizens embarked INS Airavat to come home. It says the embarkation was preceded by immigration formalities, medical screening, and baggage disinfection, following strictest protocols of social distancing and COVID 19 prevention measures in place. So, we understand that important steps have been taken by the Government of India even while carrying out rescue operation. So, this particular news must be seen from a prelims perspective. Now, the next news to be discussed appears on page number 10. It says Hyderabad firm gets DCGI nod for generic drug Remdesivir, and this approval has been given to manufacture and sell drug to treat COVID 19. Now, here the news says that the Drug Controller General of India has given its approval to two Indian drug manufacturing companies, namely Cipla Limited and Hetero Labs, and they have been given approval to produce and sell generic version of the drug remdesivir. Now, the patent holder for the drug remdesivir is Gilead Sciences, and it is in this regard that both Cipla Limited and Hetero Labs have entered into a non-exclusive licensing agreement with Gilead Sciences. And accordingly, both Cipla as well as Hetero Labs will make a generic version of the drug remdesivir to treat COVID-19. The drug produced by Cipla would be Cipremi, and the drug manufactured and sold by Hetero Labs would be known as Covi-4. Both these drugs will be used to treat the COVID-19 patients. Now, this topic becomes important from the perspective of compulsory licensing as per Section 84 of Indian Patents Act. Now, this particular news has already been discussed in detail by me on 6th June 2020, whereby we discussed not only about the compulsory licensing aspect but also with respect to the evergreening of patent. Further, we also discussed Section 84 of Indian Patent Act in detail. It says that at any time after expiration of 3 years from the date of grant of a patent, any person interested may make an application to the controller for grant of compulsory license on patent on any of the following grounds, namely that the reasonable requirements of the public with respect to the patented invention have not been satisfied, or that the patented invention is not available to the public at a reasonably affordable price, or that the patented invention is not worked in the territory of India. So these are the three grounds on which compulsory licenses can be allowed under the Indian laws. So accordingly, both Cipla and Hetero Labs have been allowed to produce as well as sell the generic version of the drug remdesivir to treat COVID-19. So in this regard, this topic becomes important both from your prelims as well as from your mains perspective. From your prelims, it gets covered under general science, and from your mains, this topic becomes important from the perspective of GS paper 3, specifically with respect to issues relating to intellectual property rights. So in this regard, this topic becomes important. And to know in detail about compulsory licensing as well as evergreening of patent, you can go through the DNS of 6 June 2020, as this topic was discussed at length about various aspects, not only about compulsory licensing as well as evergreening of patent, but also its impact on the price of such a patented drug. Now, after a discussion, this becomes your question for the day. The question is, consider the following statements about Operation Samudra Setu. First, it is being carried out to rescue Indians stuck in Maldives, Sri Lanka and other countries because of COVID-19 pandemic. Second, the operation so far has used INS Airavat, INS Jalashwa and INS Magar. So the question is, which of the statements given above are correct? Options are A, 1 only, B, 2 only, C, both 1 and 2 and D, neither 1 nor 2. Now coming to the answer of yesterday, the question was, consider the following statements. First, Galwan River is a tributary of Nubra River. No, the statement is incorrect as Galwan River is a tributary of Shyok River. Second, Galwan-Nubra confluence is towards the west of Leh. No, this statement is also incorrect because both these rivers never confluence. So the question was, select the correct answer using the code given below. Hence the correct answer here was D, that is neither 1 nor 2. So with this, we come to an end to today's discussion. Thank you.